Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborn, and on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic, impactful lessons they've learned throughout the course of their business and share them with us that we can learn as well. As always, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel of conversations with their ideal prospects. We use this method to book 26 qualified leads and sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend outreach in the social media posting or any of the old ineffective methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. It's Jason A. Osborn, and the link to that will be in the show notes below. But on today's show, I'm excited to have Randy Ross. He is the owner of Remarkable, where he provides keynote speaking and leadership development. And I'm excited to hear more about his journey and the lessons he's learned in that. So, Randy, thanks so much for being on the show. And I want to start off by asking you a question that I always love starting off with, which is this: if you were somehow able to go back in time when you started your very first business, but knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in the first 12 months?
That's a great question. And it's one that I think has all kinds of profound implications. I think for me, I wish that I had been introduced to principles of axiology much earlier, because being able to apply those principles to life and to business would have made a profound difference in the way I conduct business and how I lead.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and share some of those principles. What are those in case anyone's going, well, what is that, Randy? What do you
Yeah.
mean by that?
Well, a lot of people may not be familiar with axiology, but I'm kind of a philosophy geek, and axiology is a strain of philosophy that talks about values, value creation, and value constructs, and it has a lot to do with alignment. Alignment personally in terms of your values, making sure that they're in alignment with an organization that you serve, making sure that there's good strategic alignment across the enterprise, making sure that everybody's on the same page. But the principles of axiology are profound and have a lot to say about health, connectivity, relational development, good leadership skills. Probably one of the simplest is the maxim of creativity, which just simply says that we're all designed to create value in life. So the question that flows from that is, do you bring more to the table than you take away? There are
Mhm.
value extractors and there are value creators in life. And we all say we want to be a value creator, but very few people actually know how to do that. And the principles of axiology unpack practically how you can bring more to life. And so I think it's rich for individuals, it's rich for relationships, it's rich for business.
I love that. I love that. It's really, really powerful. Well, one of the things that I love to ask is about the scaling and growing of a business. And I know that can be fun in a lot of ways, but also really challenging as well. And I'm curious, like, what's been one of the most challenging parts of growing your business without becoming salesy or spammy in that process of doing that?
Well, I wrote a book several years ago called Relationomics. And obviously, that's a mashup of two words, relationships and economics. Um, but we can't ever underestimate the power of healthy relationships to drive business. I mean, it's as simple as
Mhm.
that. And sometimes we try a lot of impersonal means of being able to get our message out to the market. But they all, for us, they all fall flat, because I'd say 95% of what we do is word of mouth referral. People who've heard us and know what we do, and then they, tell others about our product and our service. Um, I also wrote a book several years ago called Remarkable, and Remarkable kind of encapsulates what you're talking about. Remarkable, the thesis of that is just that if you provide a service or a product and you do so in such a way that you blow people away, that you exceed all expectations, that you deliver world-class service, you go the second mile, you do everything you can to resolve problems for your clients. If you make a positive impact on other people's lives to such a degree that when they leave your presence, they have this irrepressible desire to tell other people about what you've done, then you
Mhm.
become remarkable, because being remarkable means that you've done something that marks other people's lives to such a degree that they talk about you and the service that you provided or the difference that you made in their
Mhm.
lives. So, for us, it's all about healthy relationships, and we spend all of our time helping organizations grow a culture that's relationally rich because people thrive in relationally
Mm.
rich environments. And so you can't underestimate the power and the impact of a good culture and healthy relationships.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's interesting. One of the other questions I always love to ask, which now I'm really curious to ask you in this because you're talking about relationships, is what's the one thing that you've changed or maybe you've helped other people change that builds relationships to make that whole growth process even easier or faster?
Well, the healthiest organizations that we have the privilege of working with are those organizations that have been able to create open loops of continuous feedback
Mm,
where anybody in the organization can talk to anybody else at any time about anything. And because those organizations that have open loops of feedback, you can call them good coaching conversations where you coach down, you coach sideways, you coach up. But people are engaged in sharpening each other. They become self correcting and self coaching. And so, what we'd like to do is to try to help organizations mature to the point that they deliver good coaching conversations. One of the things that keeps people engaged in an organization is, do I have the opportunity to learn and grow here? And what we've seen is that people don't quit their jobs, they quit leadership, they
mm,
quit managers. And often managers are not really equipped to have good developmental conversations with those that they lead, because maybe they were either a good subject matter expert or a great individual contributor, but they're not really a great master when it comes to creating an environment where people can
mm,
learn and grow. And I think that's one of the things that engages people more than probably anything else you can do is just good growth opportunities. And so helping organizations get to the point that they can deliver healthy coaching conversations in the appropriate way that's inspirational and encouraging can serve organizations well, because when
mm.
you grow up leaders worth following, they can create a culture of openness and engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's such an undervalued thing, I think, right now as well. And I think it can really be the heartbeat of an organization if it's done well. And so I
Yeah.
love that perspective on that. Switching gears a little bit, one of the things I'd like to talk about on this is we all, as business owners, we all go through challenges. Sometimes it can be very isolating. Um, Sometimes we can feel like we're the only ones that go through these situations when in reality it's not. So the
Yeah.
question I like to ask is this: what's been the number one challenge that you've had so far in your business? And it can be anything in the business, but what's the number one challenge you faced so far? And what's the lesson that you've learned from that?
Well, there have been a lot of challenges that we faced. So we started remarkable in January of 2008, the heart of the recession, if you recall that.
Yeah,
Not a great time to start a coaching business
yeah.
and speaking business. And then, of course, we went through COVID in 2020 and the aftermath of that in 21, and those were all challenging times. There have been a lot of uh, circumstances we had to pause and reflect and regroup and recreate ourselves. But for me, I think during COVID, I did a lot of research around the concept of the power and the efficacy of hope
Mm, yeah.
and its connection to health, wholeness, happiness, well
Mm,
being, and performance. And just the idea, the essence of hope, I think everybody would agree it's an essential element to keep the human spirit alive.
yeah. Yeah.
But very few people know how to define it. And hope is the resilience factor that we need to bounce back when life gets tough. And so
Mm,
I define hope. I did a lot of research and wrote a book called Fireproof Happiness. And we define hope as a dynamic motivational system tied to inspirational goal setting. Now that's a
mm,
mouthful, but it's impactful. It's a dynamic motivational system. It's what infuses us with energy and enthusiasm when times are tough. But it's a system, and that system can be learned. It can be adopted, and when you learn and adopt those by having literally good, solid, motivational goals, goal setting, then you begin to believe that tomorrow can be brighter, no matter how dark today may be. And so I
mm,
think to come through any time that's challenging, the power of hope is absolutely essential, not only for the human spirit to thrive, but for organizations to demonstrate
Mm.
resilience and be able to face and embrace challenging times effectively. So I think the power of hope, um, to get you through those challenging times has been instrumental for me personally and for us as a team.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I think hope is definitely so important in the business. Uh, Speaking of the hope side of it, as people are growing business, what is the I don't want to ask this question, Randy, because this is something I see with a lot of my clients as well, as they have hope in what
Yeah.
they're doing. The reality or realization of the outcome hasn't quite arrived yet.
Yeah.
And so that hope starts off as, yeah, let's get this done, let's do it. And then, it could be a month, 3 months, 6 months, maybe even longer, depending on what the thing is. And the outcome hasn't arrived yet. What are some things that people can do to power through where hope almost becomes no longer hope, it becomes that, like, is this ever going to happen? That discouragement, despair type of feeling.
Yeah, great question. And hope has four components. There are four underpinning principles to hope. The first is positivity. I believe that my tomorrow can be brighter, no matter how dark today may be. That's positivity, but it's not enough because no amount of optimism will get you through really, really challenging times in life. So the second piece is responsibility. I'm not a victim in this scenario. I have a say in how my life unfolds, and so I have to take personal responsibility in writing the next chapter of my life, and that's a big component. The third is agility. Uh, I have to understand that there's more than just one way to reach any desired destination.
Mm.
That if one way doesn't work, I can shift to another. If one way is blocked, I can either climb over it, go around it, or if I choose, I can re-goal and go in a totally different direction. But I
Mm.
have that agility within myself to pursue a myriad of options that may be before me. And then the last piece, and this is what you're talking about, is just your reality. You have to embrace your reality, embracing the totality of reality. That's essential because sometimes, you're headed in one direction and you begin to hit obstructions or resistance, and you have to stop and evaluate what's the reality. Will this cost me more than it's worth to press through this? Do I need to
Mm.
find an alternate route? Because again, there's more than one way to get to a desired destination. And
Mm.
so if that goal is absolutely imperative or important, then you can find different means to get there. And if all those routes seem to be blocked, sometimes we simply have to back up, address the reality, and re-goal. And
Mhm.
sometimes we have to get to a certain point where there's a fork in the road. And had we not pursued that goal, I think some people get discouraged that, oh, that didn't materialize, so I failed. No, you went down that path so that
Mm.
you could get to the juncture to see a better alternative.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset that we have to have. Because I can think so many times in my life and career where I hit what seemingly was a wall, but in reality, it was just a sign to redirect me. And as I
Mhm.
look back on those experiences, I'm so glad I did not attain the goal I originally was seeking because what the alternate path provided was a reward that was so much greater in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of, it's not, sometimes people think hope is a Pollyanna attitude. It's really not. It embraces reality, but always keeps the eye toward the fact that tomorrow can be brighter. And I
Yeah.
have a say in how that unfolds. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to unpack there. But
Yeah.
if you truly understand hope, sometimes people say hope's not a strategy, but I disagree.
Mm.
Hope has to be the substance and the foundation of all strategy.
Yeah.
Because if your people are hopeless about the pursuit of any objective, the likelihood of you attaining it is slim to
Yeah.
none. And
Yeah.
so hope
Exactly.
has to be foundational in what we do.
Yeah. 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 I love that. That's amazing. Well, Randy, over the next 2 to 3 years, what are your goals? What would you like to achieve in your business?
Expand our impact, encourage more people, I'm a big student of the Gallup organization, and
Yep.
when you realize that such a small percentage of the world's population is actively engaged, meaning they're excited about work, to me, I want to change that.
Yeah.
The global engagement right now, Gallup just came out with the report yesterday, and it's substantially down. Hasn't been lower since 2020. And so that means that overall, we're losing about $10 trillion a year globally in lost opportunity costs just because people aren't passionate about what they do. And for
Wow.
me, that's a real shame because I believe that if we spend as much time at work as we do, we ought to find meaning and fulfillment in that work. And so I'm wholeheartedly dedicated to changing that landscape.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love hearing that. Well, for people that are wanting to get in touch with you and learn a little bit more about what you do, what's the best way for people to do that, Randy?
Easy. Just go to our website. It's drrandyross.com, drrandyross.com, and you'll see our services and our offerings there. We'd be delighted to engage people in conversations to explore how we can serve them.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I definitely recommend everyone checking that out. As you can hear from what Randy has said so far, lots of great valuable content. So I know you'll be able to get more from his website. And if you feel you can benefit from him, definitely reach out as well. So, Randy, thank you so much for being on the show and taking the time out. I know you've been traveling a lot, so thank you so much for being here and really appreciate it. And as a reminder for everyone listening as well, the show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel of conversation with their ideal prospects that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. And until next episode, stay inspired.